Hi, everyone, and welcome to Wholesale Change, the webcast and podcast where we provide thought leadership for wholesale change agents like you. Because if you're on this broadcast, you probably are a wholesale change agent. My name is Ian Heller. I'll be your co-host today, along with my business partner and friend, the magnificent mogul of math and the doctor of distribution, Jonathan Bein, PhD. How are you today, Jonathan?
I'm well, Ian, but let's level set. You were the smartest guy in the room, and we're about to have an even smarter guy in the room as our
Yeah, the last point may be right. Your first one is definitely not. We're going to have a great discussion today. Thank you for joining us. I'll introduce him in a minute, but first I want to thank our sponsor, because without our sponsor, this show wouldn't be possible. And this show's brought to you by Epicor. For nearly 50 years, Epicor has helped distributors stay ahead with flexible, powerful solutions designed to increase sales, streamline operations, and improve customer experience. Epicor's industry-leading distribution ERP solutions are built specifically to meet the unique needs of wholesalers with everything needed to grow your sales, profits, and productivity while distancing yourself from the competition. Epicor is focused on the things that matter to you: work queues, PO variance queues, kitting, assembly, and production orders, advanced inventory forecasting, VMI, and special project pricing. They build their software using industry best practices and 50 years of distribution experience. But Epicor's solutions are far more than just tools for picking, packing, and shipping. Fully cloud-based with a modern UI, Epicor offers complete, robust e-commerce solutions, powerful BI and analytics tools, modern API and EDI, value-added services, WMS, virtual assistants, and much more. You can learn more about how Epicor helps thousands of wholesalers succeed by visiting epicor.com. Okay, great. Well, thanks again, Epicor. We appreciate your support. And now let me introduce our guest for today, Peter Jackson. Peter, why don't you join us, and we will walk through your background a little bit. So you bought Miller Industrial, never been in industrial distribution before, and you bought this 100-year-old family-owned business in 2018 and joined us in the wholesale distribution industry. So my first question is, were you drunk when you made this deal?
I was sober,
okay.
And searching for a business is a very sobering experience as well.
Yeah, because you spent like a year looking for a business to buy, right?
I did.
And tell me about your background. I'm joking. I mean, I'm delighted you're in the industry, and I think you're going to have a lot of success with Miller. But most people who are in distribution seem to have been in the industry for a long time. So I do want to read a couple quotes. This is out of your LinkedIn profile. So when I was doing my background research for the show, somebody who worked for you, and he has his name associated with this quote. I just didn't use it here. So he put up his hand and said this. It says, having Peter Jackson as a manager is like having Phil Jackson as an NBA coach. They might even be related somehow. So first question is, are you related to Phil Jackson?
No, far fewer rings.
And then, and what do you think it is? I mean,
you got time to catch up on the bling, though. There's a possibility, right?
Not that much time.
Yeah, I don't know. Do they give rings out at NAW meetings? We'll have to find out. So what is it that makes you the Peter Jackson of a man? I mean, I know, look, nobody likes to brag about themselves. I know you don't, because I've talked to you a couple of times. But this is not an isolated instance. If you go down your recommendations, whether you were at Groupon or wherever, a lot of people say, really nice things about you. What do you do that makes them that loyal to you?
You mean other than the checks in the mail?
Yes, because every manager offers that, and they don't get these kinds of endorsements.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just a personal belief that, in a management role, I look at it as you're more of a coach than a boss, right? I think I sort of play with the sort of 20th century ways of running a business versus the 21st century ways of running a business, and just I think a lot about how do you look at work as a way to perform, and then if you're a really good manager, you're helping people find their way of getting at their best self. And so if you sort of have that kind of, a little bit of servant leadership type feel to it, of just saying, all right, well, my team, I want them to be their best version of themselves, and everybody's got a little different way to get there. So the hard part as a manager is no one size fits all. You got to tailor it to, sort of your, team of employees. And so it's a lot of energy, but I've tried to in various roles do that. And, of course, only the successes are on LinkedIn. Let's be real about it, right? Like, you don't see the Yelp reviews that are like the 1-star. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, a lot of people in their best day don't have endorsements like yours. So you have quite a background here. If you're going to major in economics, the University of Chicago is almost inarguably the best school in the world to go to. And then if you're going to get an MBA, then Northwestern, where just by sheer coincidence, I got my MBA, is without a doubt the best school in the world to get your MBA at. I'm sure you agree. So,
Contractually obligated.
So what was it like going to those programs, and how has that prepared you for what you do today and what you've done so far in your career?
So, University of Chicago, particularly in my day, they've softened it a little bit, but it's just hardcore academic, competitive excellence. Just the smartest people I've ever been around by a long shot. I spent a summer in New York, while I was in college, working at an investment bank, thinking I'd meet equally smart people on Wall Street. No. So I remember one of my dorm mates freshman year, he was a calculus TA for graduate students. He had learned calculus in 8th grade. I'm sure he's a professor now in math and physics or whatever, but just crazy amount of talented brains there. And so I did terribly there, but realized what smart is. And it was almost like, being a great high school athlete, then you get to the D1 level and you're like, oh, wow, my stuff's not as fast as it was in high school, or, the college athletes that get to the pros.
You graduated. I have a friend who graduated from West Point, and he said, what they call the lowest ranking graduate in any class?
Like cadet or whatever, officer, lieutenant. Yeah. It's going up the ranks.
Right. No, you had the right idea. Okay, great. And then how did you have a gap before you went over to Kellogg?
Yes, I did. So I knew, corporate environments I quickly fell out of, right? So, had that summer at the investment bank between, junior and senior college. Right after college, went and worked for Jones Lang LaSalle, and, very similar to the Wall Street kind of vibe. Didn't get along with anybody there. I was just always a misfit for these big professional service organizations. So right after that, fell into what I thought was going to be 2-3 year stint, was almost 7 years in home improvement, working for a replacement window retailer. And my boss at the time sat in a similar chair that I do today, which is really funny. Just had bought that business, didn't come from the home improvement world,
right, and
just was able to grow it through marketing strategy. And we basically were luckier than we were smart. We sort of rode the housing wave up and down. And by 2008, I was just like, all right, we need to figure out this whole future internet web thing. I knew nothing, but I knew the way we were trying to run our home improvement business wasn't going to survive if we didn't figure out new ways of doing things. My boss disagreed. He was close to retirement, had seen his business go from $3-4 million a year to $12 million a year by 2007. And then 2008, things started declining really rapidly. And so I said to him, I was like, I'm not learning anything here. I want to do these other things. He thought they were too risky. So, maybe in a moment of maybe I was drunk then, but I quit my job. Okay. Right. And it was the first time I'd ever quit my job without having another job lined up.
Right.
And I quit in sort of economic Armageddon. I told him I was quitting in December 2008, and I ended up being unemployed until I ultimately left. My last day was March, but I ended up being unemployed for another 2 months after that. So into 2009, and recruiting wise, it was clear at that time that only a startup would hire me. And I was also in business school part-time at that time too, at Kellogg. So, and that was an interesting experience too. There wasn't any other classmates I had at Kellogg who, worked in the home improvement business.
Yeah. Right.
So
right.
I've just sort of been used to being this misfit, my whole life. So, and that theme has kind of run through my work experience. And so, ended up getting an offer at Groupon, an unknown company at that time, in
Right.
sort of May 2009, and I met one of the co-founders, early investors, in a business school class that he was a guest at Kellogg, and so I just joined on a lark of just saying, all right, I knew I wanted to learn this digital 21st century, like internet stuff. This is my shot, whatever. If it doesn't pan out, I'll do something else. That was literally how I made the decision. And I also didn't have any other options. Like, and it ended up being this rocket ship I randomly jumped on, and I just learned as much as I could, studied as much as I could, gotten the details of, our business model. And I sold for a year, managed a team of salespeople for 2 years. And it was the first time in my life where you had to sell something that doesn't exist to somebody that's not even next to you virtually, right? So we launched markets as an inside sales team across the country. Like, we'd be in Chicago. The first market I opened was Los Angeles, then San Diego. I'd been to Los Angeles. I'd never been to San Diego before. Yeah. And we got, 30 businesses to sign up for this online coupon. And yeah, sure. It was crazy. And after that experience,
you were there right at the knee and the curve of when they took off, right?
Yeah. So I was
not when you started, but by the time you left, they had really hit that hyper growth, right?
Absolutely. So I was employee number 28 at Groupon, and maybe that year in 2009, I don't know, maybe we did 30, 40, $50 million. I don't even remember the number, but yeah, by the time I left, we were doing $2 billion a year in sales. Wow. Right. And it had gone from a private company to a public company with employees all over the world.
Well, I know you guys grew because I used a Groupon for my colonoscopy, and I never expected to see that.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was like, wow, we did a lot of invasive stuff in people's minds, but I didn't know it went to the body level as well.
I actually stole that joke from Harrison Ford. Different story, but anyway, okay, good. So, and you were at Groupon, and then you left to go to Tradecraft Outfitters. What is that?
Yeah. So before, Ian, you're an incredible name dropper, by the way.
No. I saw it on YouTube. He's not a friend.
Okay.
He's not a friend of mine.
All right. No. So in between, when I left Groupon after we went public, for me, lost the entrepreneurial vibe. I sort of need that. And so I just launched my own one-man consulting operation, trying to take things I had learned at Groupon to these other worlds. Selling for a year, managing salespeople in that sort of what is an ad sales environment, talking to small business owners all over the country, you sort of practice the Michael Gerber E-Myth in a way where you see a whole bunch of businesses who are great at the technical skill. I am, great as a chef. I'm great as an esthetician. I'm great as a golf pro, but I don't know how to scale a business, right? Yeah, so
for those of you who don't know, the E-Myth Revisited is a classic for people who are trying to build small businesses. And I think you've read that, and we talked about that the other day. It's a really important book for entrepreneurs. And so it speaks well of you that you sought that out and read it. I bet it's been helpful.
Yeah, super helpful. It's such a great frame for understanding what your job is actually as the entrepreneur, so to speak. And it's your systems builder and you're a designer. And, I practice and preach that every week here now in my current role, but it took me a while to get to that practice. Right. So I just started playing with, okay, I can be my one-man consulting show, going to small businesses, work my friends and family network, going to small businesses as a consultant, try and teach them things I learned at Groupon. Right. Every single gig I did, and I floated in and out of full-time work for almost 5 years. Every single gig I had, and the same way where these business owners would be like, Peter, I can tell you did your homework on my industry. You did, everything makes sense. That sounds like crazy talk, what you're asking me to do though. Right. And a lot of it was where I sort of learned this, every industry's got its status quo, right? This is the way, these are the rules of the game. This is how everybody who identifies themselves as part of this industry plays the game. And what was super interesting to me was, well, how do you play by different rules? Can you win? Can you get an advantage? Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that, I mean, you wound up in industrial distribution, which has its own paradigms and set of rules, right? And what drew you to the industry? And then when you're done talking about why you made this decision to join this industry, tell me what you've discovered are the paradigms. And there's very little difference between paradigms and best practices, right? So what are the
Right.
paradigms and best practices, and how do you see them through a lens of someone who comes from a very different industry background?
Sure. So it's a two-part question. You'll have to remind me when I'm done with the
I will.
first part. Okay.
You
All
got
right.
it. Go.
So, so how I found this industry, I've got this, thesis that I've written about on my LinkedIn page called the Superman theory. And, effectively, nerd alert, the mythology of Superman is all right. So you have this guy, the son of Jor-El on planet Krypton, guy's a nobody with the exception of just, being, born into royalty essentially. And everybody else besides that fact is just like him on planet Krypton. Comes to Earth, we call him Superman. Why? Well, we just haven't seen anybody like that before.
Right.
Is he super in the absolute sense? Not really. He's just super in the relative sense. And so, I thought a lot about, after my experiences in kind of the digital world like Groupon, it's like, all right, most of my friends at Groupon went to work for other technology startups in Chicago, on the East Coast, West Coast, big tech, Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, et cetera. And I said, I'm not doing any of that. I'm going to go back in time and try and compete in sort of a more traditional sort of 20th century type of business, unsexy, boring. So, after my consulting experience, I realized nobody's going to take my ideas. I have to do them myself. They're just like, everybody finds them just too scary, too weird, too like, what? Like, I don't get it. And so I knew I'd have to do an acquisition. I'd never done that before. And I knew I want to look at industrials because it's literally where nobody's looking. And I think about competitive design for competitive advantage a lot. It's like, choose your competitor wisely, right? So I thought about that a lot. That was my risk management. I had never come into this world. So it's like, choose your competitors wisely. Who's just like not, so in my mind, Jonathan, you mentioned talent management early on this call. It's like, I think about, all right, well, where's talent flowing? Right. So, if you look at where talent's flowing, it's like, all right, it's Wall Street, it's Silicon Valley. Right. It's like these, the Goldmans, the Googles, or even management consulting, McKinsey's of the world are just hoard talent. Right.
They're dripping. They're dripping with it.
Yeah, they're dripping with it. Right. And they've created a really good marketing machine where they say, hey, everybody, if you've been privileged enough in American society to have gone to the US News and World Report, top 25 colleges, come work for us. Wow. And you'll be on this path to a relatively risk-free way to earn $500,000 to $1 million a year for life, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we're going to grill you. We're going to grind you to the ground. Like, there's no such thing as work-life balance. You trade that off, yada, yada. And so I said, all right, well, where are those types of folks absolutely not going to look? Well, not here in this industrial environment that I'm currently competing in. So that's kind of, I knew when I wanted to acquire a business, it had to be there because I don't want to see guys from Harvard. No offense, Ian. I don't want to see guys from Kellogg either. So, it's.
I just like to say you knew that coming into this call. So, by the way, if you have questions, please click the Q&A button. We'd love to have questions for our guests. And so, Peter, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I think so, from your perspective, and I think, by the way, the things you're talking about are what are drawing the disruptors to this industry, right? So if you're Amazon, who would you rather compete with, Google or Grainger, right? Nothing wrong with Grainger. It's a very talented company. They've got a lot of great people there, but they're not a, $100 billion behemoth with leading AI experts to the degree that Google is,
Correct.
right? And
Correct.
And by the way, they're probably the strongest competitor or one of the strongest competitors in the industry.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, then you've got Alibaba moving in and Berkshire Hathaway's buying companies. So I think,
Sure.
You're in good company with people who are saying, well, there's less innovation here. And some of that's because we don't really draw innovators as much, or we haven't traditionally because it's been a slow changing industry. But that's all changing right now, right? So when you look at what's happening with your competitors and with your business, where do you think you can apply innovation in a way that brings you competitive advantage?
So I think also choose your customers too. I mean, we're not a big bit, we're not a big business. We're, on pace to do somewhere between $3.5 and $4 million a year in sales this year. And so I look and I go, all right, well, we got to choose wisely our customer who we can serve, given our size, given our resources, and look at, all right, well, who are the small manufacturers? Who are the small construction companies? Who are the small logistics companies that we can service better than Grainger, because Grainger says we can't make enough return on investment if we invest in these kinds of customers. Right. And so
you wanted to fly under the radar of where the big boys are playing.
Absolutely. And I sort of think about, competitive strategy design a lot. And, it's almost like you want to be really good and also really secretive, right? I mean, there's something about, Apple's obsessively secretive about their intellectual property. But like, I go, there's something to this whole game that you play where you're like, we work really hard to be excellent for a core audience. And people say, oh, then the mythology starts happening when you do great things. And then you just say, oh yeah, we're special. We float on water. Right. So it's just like, and just people it kind of perpetuates sort of the business mythology where there's not a process to this. You're either lucky enough to be born with the gift of, creativeness, or you're not unlucky person. Right. And I see it vastly differently.
So there's another great distributor in Chicagoland called McMaster-Carr.
Sure.
I figured you run into them. They are the most secretive large distributor that I know. It's really hard to get information out of them. Right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. When I was at Grainger, someone had told us that, hey, McMaster-Carr has a on hold message that's a little bit takes a shot at Grainger. So I was like, really? So I had somebody call so that they could listen to the on hold message, and they came back and said, I called 100 times. I never got put on hold. True story. Okay. So someone in our audience, Coburn, has said, I love how they cut through the red tape on their website. So what are you doing differently on your website that looks like you're cutting cutting red tape?
I think he's referring to the dad joke on the website. So there's a part that says forms and red tape. And then if you click on red tape, it takes you to a product page for literally buying red rolls of red tape.
Oh my gosh, that is a dad joke.
Yeah. So, and our business is riddled with this type of humor. So, I love infusing, these kinds of things into, our business. I mean, we just recently did a, private label garbage bags, sort of thing where we could put our own label up, and the company, I'm screwing it up, but it was supposed to have two labels. One that's, was a nod to Oscar the Grouch. And then, another one that said, hello, my name is Oscar. So they ended up screwing it up. So we didn't get it the way I wanted it, but that's fine. But like, it's those types of, but we did get the point of, product display, right, where it said this product is trash, period. So right. It's those kinds of things that, I just know nobody's really going to do. They take themselves too seriously. Right. And so, one of the things I think about a lot is, you sort of why in the future, it's like Amazon is like robot king, right? So it's like Amazon's got this vision of automation is going to rule. There's no other version of humanity that can exist. Okay, cool. So that's a dominant, powerful vision. That's great. But I don't think that's the only, vision that can coexist, right? And so I think a lot about, well, what can humans do better than robots, right? So, humans have, imagination. Humans deal with nonlinearity, and humans have sort of endurance through sort of nonlinear, types of environments. So I think if you embrace all of those things, you can carve out some really interesting business opportunities.
Yeah. So people should go to your website, by the way. I think it's millerindustrial.com. Is that right?
Yep.
I love at the bottom of the page, most people have an about us page. You have
why don't you just share it?
Okay.
Just for grids. I mean, serious.
Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't crash. That would be like a Bill Gates demo.
Yeah, that would be bad, but I don't think that's going to happen.
You aspire to.
Yeah.
So I like
much traffic and crash.
I like the Miller propaganda.
Sure.
The forms and red tape. I actually didn't see this, so thanks for Coburn for sending it in. There's the red tape. When you click on forms and red tape, you got your category killers for products. Your Miller's Graffiti Wall Madness event. We can custom match any color paint to a spray can. So you're using, looks like you're using gamification.
That's a big deal, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, people that need to match color, they make themselves crazy trying to match color. It doesn't matter what the medium is. It doesn't matter whether it's online, something that's going to go on a wall, flooring, on the outside of your house, matching colors is a big deal, right?
Yeah, and we've tried to look for those kinds of opportunities. I mean, the way I think about, and I think, Ian, this is the second part of your question, which is sort of what are the best practices or sort of status quo type things that I see a lot. And, one of those things is there's so much product focus in this industry, right? So, I look at our suppliers and I look at, customers who have told me about, our competitors, particularly the macro ones like Grainger, and everybody's, for the most part, is thinking about how do I, here's a typical kind of pitch I get. Hey, Peter, lucky you, it's March 31st. You know what that means? 10% off hammers, right? And it's just like, okay, well, clearly I'm assuming I wasn't the only one who got that message. You show me you haven't done a whole lot of homework on me or my business. You'd realize, like, I don't even come from this industry. So it's just like, why is that even going to be remotely relevant? Right. And so what we've tried to do, and it's really hard to do, I mean, is sort of say, okay, how do we find, how do we custom tailor messages to particular customers who have very specific challenges they're dealing with? And then how do we do it in a way that is just fun, interesting, engaging, sort of connects with some emotional elements? And that's where, I think a focus on design, this whole sort of, how do you bring sort of humanity and some, creativity and some sexiness to a world, for the most part, that doesn't think on, those tangents. Yeah.
So that's your warehouse on the right? I mean, it really looks squared away.
Yeah, that's how it looks inside. And we're going to do an interior redesign of that even. So next year, we're doing the exterior. Yeah. Well,
I mean, I think it's, when you talk about design and innovation, that's great, but you have to be a good operator to run a distribution company. This looks like a branch run by a good operator to me.
Well, thank you. I still have a long way to go. I mean, you talk about, kind of where do I see my own gaps? And, I in preparation for this conversation, I watched Mike Takeda's from Lawson, the podcast you guys did with him. And in my mind, I'm going, how do I follow up after that guy? I mean, this guy gave, a sort of a black belt karate demo to your audience the other week. And, here I am in a white belt, kind of talking about, well, guys, what we need to do is paint the fence and sand the floor. Right. And it's like, doesn't Mr. Miyagi usually come after Daniel's son? But, so, I think one of my gaps for sure is, how do you start to look at operations and sort of this Lean Six Sigma and go down that road? I mean, that's a huge opportunity for us. I mean, we are still kind of running our business mom and poppy. That's changing. It's changed over the 3 years, I've been working here. But I after looking at, what Mike's done at Lawson, I go, man, there's a massive opportunity to sort of just be a great operator, not just an okay mom and pops, you're good, but like just actually be a great operator, even as a small business. I think that's a really solid opportunity for us.
What services do you offer? I know you mentioned VMI in there. What do you guys do for services?
So we've got, so vending machines on site, been maintenance.
Really? Okay.
Yep. We on premise here, we cut keys, pipe, plexiglass, glass, reprogram certain car keys. We're trying to match paint, spray paint, custom colors, that stuff. And we're trying to figure out what other value-added services can we offer. We tried a rental test last summer, and maybe the timing wasn't great. Maybe it just didn't work for us, right? So like a tool rental program.
Yeah.
But we're trying to solve that problem by playing with experiments and ideas. I mean, I think one of the things that, has been hard to get across to the team, but we're finally starting to get the energy of doing it, is this idea where it's an experiment. If the experiment fails, as long as it's controlled, we allocated budget already, a small budget. If it doesn't work, hey, you still got a job at Miller. So like, that should have worked, right? It's just, and getting that whole energy around, it's okay to be creative. It's okay to experiment. If it doesn't work, guess what? We're going to come up with some other idea that will work, right? And
So
having
Jeff
It
Bezos,
feels like a concept from the tech world of fast and or cheap failure, right?
correct.
You know that term, right?
Yep. Fast failure. Absolutely, Jonathan.
Maybe explain it a little bit. I think it's a great concept here.
Yeah. So I think if you're really after doing, so ultimately what I'm after is, all right, what are things we can do that are just not going to be copied very well? We had it's sort of business strategy kind of 101 and differentiation. And the way to sort of get at that is through experimentation, play, and testing, and figuring out. And Amazon calls us working backwards, which I just recently learned from reading a book by the same title about their whole innovation process. So they look at a customer's world and go, what should exist but doesn't? Right. So they literally saying, all right, this should exist but currently doesn't. Let's work backwards to figure out how we actually get it to happen, to exist. And that world of being like both imaginative and also having the execution to bring something to life, that's a dual-pronged discipline. And you're really talking about both sides of the brain in concert, and teams of people using both sides of their brain in concert. I mean, this is why not everybody is just like, yay, I'm psyched to, dream up something new, right? And of course, and a lot of these things kind of work like the venture capital model, where you're going to fund 10 ideas, most of them are going to do nothing, and then 2 are going to be home runs kind of thing. Right. And so basically, if you approach it that way, where I'm going to choose the best ideas I can, work backwards, I don't know which ones are going to be the successful ones, and I don't care. I just know if I follow this process, I will have great outcomes. And so part of that process is just saying, all right, well, let's kill the ideas as fast as possible that aren't showing traction. And let's manage this budget in such a way where we don't spend $10,000 just to say, oh, didn't work, unless that's the minimum amount it takes to bring an idea to life. And obviously the beautiful part about this is that it scales. The larger your business gets, the bigger your bets can get. I mean, now Amazon's making $100 million bets that they can throw away if it doesn't work, right? But look at their scale. And that's the power of sort of having this type of work process built into your business as it grows. Your bets just get bigger. And that also means your payoffs get bigger if you hit. So I find that way of designing a business super, super interesting.
So the batting average of the venture capital guys, is that a high enough batting average for you?
What's really interesting about the VC model is that they go, we know we're going to have a low batting average in terms of how often we hit or get on base. But when we do, the impact when we score is so tremendous. Right. It more than makes up. Yeah. So it's
Sammy Sosa tape measure home run type of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, I can't remember if this was Scott Galloway. I think it was Scott Galloway, but some thinker wrote a book about this, and he said the problem with the baseball, maybe it was even Jeff Bezos, the problem with the baseball analogy
is Bezos. Yeah.
Okay. Right. The maximum you can get is 4 runs.
Correct.
But actually, if you hit the right idea, you can get 1,000 runs.
1,000 home runs. That's correct.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's where that came from. Interesting.
And so it's a bet on impact over perfection. And what's really interesting about that frame is that I think in American kind of education culture, American business culture, we tend to want to be perfect, right? We say, hey, I bat 1,000. Oh, okay. Like, well, what's your impact? Well, I don't measure that.
Right. Versus, if you're batting 1,000, you're not taking any risks. Right.
Sure. Right. And so it's this comfort with, hey, we're going to structure things where psychologically we're prepared to have a low batting average, but when we hit, it's just crazy.
So I love that thinking, but there are some nuts and bolts things you have to do in a distribution company, like manage inventory, manage accounts receivable, make sure
Yes.
customer service is bulletproof. You have good service recovery practices. How much of that did you bring with you, and how much of that did you have to learn when you got here?
So all of those nuts and bolts I've had to learn.
Okay.
Right. So, basically all my weaknesses are the things that everybody else just focuses, highly on. Right. And I go, that's great. I mean, we'll get the way, and again, for the audience that we're servicing right now, we're doing good work. And so I get better at those things. Now we go from good to great, basically.
Right.
Right. The things that I'm bringing into this industry are all this, this whole design of, what should exist but doesn't, and then how do you continuously bring those things into your audience's world over and over and over and over again. So you sort of build competencies over time as well.
Yeah. So where do you go from here? I mean, I assume you're going to sort of stick in your own backyard for now, right? And try to get wallet share and market share. Cause I know you're in one of the world's largest industrial parks.
Correct.
And
yeah.
And you're doing a lot of stuff that a typical industrial distributor might not do, like doing keys. So you're sort of an industrial hardware store /
Hybrid.
industrial distributor, right? Right.
Correct.
So where do you go from here? How do you think about continuing to grow the business? A lot of competition, but a lot of business out there to get.
Sure. So my original investment thesis was I just see also an aging ownership base in this world of industrial. And so, it's interesting too, Mike Takeda talked about two types of private equity, companies, those that have sort of this, standalone group of portfolio companies, or those that are literally saying, hey, we're going to do this specialty bigger and better than anybody. And that's how we're going to invest. Right. And so I see myself as, trying to move to one form or the other of having the opportunity to say, okay, hey, there's actually a really interesting kind of private equity design firm kind of model. This is the ultimate model that I actually am after. So basically, if you look at the traditional interdisciplinary design firm, you have a whole bunch of graphic designers, product designers, web designers, industrial designers, all sort of in the same group. And their business model is the agency model. They charge by the hour to probably a Fortune 500 company to make something better for that Fortune 500 company, right? And so I actually think there's an interesting opportunity in private equity to say, let's take that same talent of design, and instead of using the agency model, let's use the capital model. So instead of saying, hey, Fortune 500 company, you pay us and whatever we design for you, you keep the key. No, we're going to take all that design talent, just design it ourselves and go buy a business and then use that design as the massive competitive advantage, because in these industrial environments, there just aren't a whole lot of designers creating things that have the potential to be these, sort of 1,000-run impact things that Bezos refers to.
Right.
It's interesting you bring that up, Peter, because I think one of the things that the PE funds also do is they look for what's known as a platform company, right? The platform company. So let's go back to Lawson. Lawson is a platform company into which they can acquire add-ons.
Yep.
And the platform has certain things that the add-ons are not going to get to in the near term. So it might be they're really good at e-commerce. It might be they're really good at pricing. And then when you bring the add-on into the platform, the add-on starts performing like the platform in those areas where the platform has strength. So it might be 15 or 18 months later, they are now pricing as well as the platform company, right? So it feels like what you're describing is a platform model. That's where you want to be the platform eventually, right?
Yeah, and I think there's a way to do design as a platform, right? In these environments that typically don't put design first or consider design at all.
But what do you mean by design?
Yeah, so I look at design so the definition to me of design, I take it from Steve Jobs. It's how something works. Most people think of design as how something looks. I think that's sort of the the frosting of design, and the cake of design is how something works. And so, if you combine the two, it's just, you're trying to, bake a great cake, great frosting, great, cakey cake. Right. And so, and design's also centered around solving problems for a particular audience. There's no universal design. Right. So you're basically saying, all right, what audience has problems that we think we can solve in these very elegant ways, way better than anybody else that they might look to as an option. And then if you can do that, it's like, all right, well, now you sort of, stand, kind of on your own island, which is what I'm after, right? It's like, I don't want a whole lot of people. I guess maybe this is my own dealing with my own trauma of life. Like, I don't like, I've been a misfit my whole life. It's like, I don't want a whole lot of other people looking like me at this point in time. It's like, I'm good actually being this island. Right. And, I sort of, to borrow, paraphrase, Jerry Garcia, he says something like, you want to be the only one who does, what you do. Right. And so, obviously the funny thing about that is, like, for a guy who's, driving the train high on cocaine, and just to also be actually pretty good marketing consultant, who to thunk that. Right. But, I look at, using design in that sort of positioning way, where you can solve, sort of this target audience's problem better than their competing alternatives. And then that's how you grow the business. It's less about financial engineering, which is what you typically find from the Harvard guys, and way more about, how an IDEO would solve the problem, except you own the equity of the business. You solve the problem, you own the equity of the business.
So Peter Drucker would agree with Jerry Garcia. They're not often considered in the same sentence. But Peter Drucker said the essence of strategy is avoiding competition.
Right.
And
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. So if you're coming up, I think it was him, but anyway, if you're coming up with solutions that nobody else has, then you're not competing with them anymore.
Correct. And that's where I see, that's my whole investment thesis, right? I mean, that literally is the Superman theory. You're not absolutely great. You're just relatively great, right? It's like, it's like if you're a grown ass man playing, a dodgeball or hoops against fifth graders, it's like, yeah, you'll probably win. And
I would not, just so you know, but I think generally I accept your point.
Right. And just, hang up your Nikes if LeBron shows up, right? You just, right? I mean, just like, I just retired, y'all. Like, yeah, of course you did. So.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about, Jonathan, or Peter?
Yeah, there is one really important thing. So we were talking about this a little bit before the show, Peter. If I were to start a distribution business today, I would start digitally. I would start with potentially being a pure digital distributor. So I'm curious how you think about digital, but also let's take it up a notch more broadly about omnichannel and how that plays out for a small distributor that's getting going again.
Yeah. So we so obviously here and now and going forward, you have to build some digital competency, right? Whether you do it internally, acquire it, some way you have to weave it into the future of your business, right? And so the reason why I sort of bring up omnichannel when it comes to, industrial distribution is I think you also have to be careful with digital and technology in the sense that you got to put it in its right context. It's a tool to make something better for an audience. It doesn't just exist in and of itself. Right. And I think that's where and you can sort of just be too much into that. And the examples I always give are like of social media. It's like people are like, oh, you have to do this on social media. It's like, well, if your audience isn't there, why are you sending Mark and Priscilla's kids to college? Right. Like it just doesn't make sense. Right. So in an omnichannel world, I think what's really interesting is that, whatever, there's 4 generations in the workforce in sort of these industrial environments right now that have grown up in different times of US history that, from the, more recent stages have been vastly accelerated, and digital competencies have been vastly accelerated. Buying preferences are different. Political attitudes are different, yada, 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 the whole thing. I mean, it's just a hot mess. And so that influences how people make buying decisions. So since I think about design a lot, I think you can have sort of multiple designs from multiple groups of people and just weave them into your business really well. So in our case, I bought a business that was already a hybrid. We're kind of like a hardware store on steroids. And we also, 90% of what we do is B2B for, manufacturers, construction companies, logistics companies. So we're already in this crazy sort of hybrid omni-channel thing. And, I want to keep extending that because I do see there's some value to that. If I would have bought a more traditional distributor, I think I would lean more into, the digital side as a competency and just improve and use technology to improve, a lot of the traditional metrics that we're going to start to, sort of go down the sort of lean Six Sigma type of mindset, with the operations and use sort of, digital technology to get, make progress on that front as fast as possible. But we're doing both of those, sort of right now.
Phenomenal. That makes all the sense in the world. I like what you're saying because you're hybrid. It doesn't end up as the pure digital distributor.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. And I'm agnostic too. If people say, "Hey, Peter, we love," and so here's how I think about omnichannel design as well. So I sort of split out, the channels into three domains. There's a retail channel, which, in our case is, a whole bunch of people walking their front door, picking stuff off the shelf, checking out at point of sale, usually with terms on some accounts receivable, balance. So there's an experience in retail. We also do, sort of the vendor managed inventory stuff. So call that field services. And then there's an experience in the digital world. And so the way I think about design is that you can do really special things in each one of those domains native to the domain. So there are things that you can do in retail that you can't do online and that you can't do in somebody else's premises. Obviously nobody's going to let you spray paint a wall on their premises, most likely. You can do that at Miller. And, there's things you can do online that you can't do in a retail, and even if it's your own facility, you can't do it in somebody else's facility, usually related to, some really interesting, sort of attention distraction types of things, whether it's games, whether it's quick education, whether it's video, sort of anything that's sort of fun on a phone. And then there's things you can do in somebody else's premises that's an interesting experience for them that just simply can't happen in your own retail facility and online. So, the way I think, if I had, sort of unlimited funds right now, I'd have a chief designer for each one of those channels. And then they'd also talk to each other about, all right, well, what are the common themes that run through all of our channels so that it feels very Millery? Like that's sort of how I, sort of structure that.
And that's in the context of you thinking of design, as how something works and not how something looks.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, of course, all of these things, no matter, let me see if I can, well, anyway, we just recently redid one of our boxes. And, we went from the kind of the typical brown kind of box to, yellow, black, white, big letters, just all
right.
funkiness. And that's both, that's really more of a how something looks. So we'd have both in the design of stuff.
So send us an image because we'll be doing an article out of this and we can include it in that.
Yeah, I will. And we did sort of both forms of design for some of our labels on bins as well.
Got it. Right. Those are normally nothing. They're just boring.
Exactly.
Right. Good. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really interesting and
fun
and fun. And, good luck to you. Your contact information is here on the bottom right. If you want to reach Peter, you can email him at millerindustrial99@gmail.com. We're delighted to have you on the show today, Peter. I'm sure we'll talk to you again. Let us know if we can help you with anything. Next show, you bet. Our next show is on April 28th. And that is with Frank Hurt, and we will be discussing value-added services. He wrote a book on the subject. And then on April 6th, is April 28th really our next show?
No, that was 2 shows from now.
Okay, I got that off our website, so we may want to go back and look. So that'd be 2 shows from now, so mid-April. And then on April 6th, anyway, on April 6th, we have a webinar that we're doing in cooperation with the NAW on how to develop a marketplace strategy. I've been working my tail off on this. This is the hardest thing I've ever written. I've been talking to some of the smartest people in distribution to figure out how to develop marketplace strategies. It's really coming together. I hope you will join us for that material. You can go to naw.org to join that. My contact information is on the right. So is Jonathan's. Peter, it's been absolutely a delight preparing with you for this call, researching your company and the fun things you have on your website and all the great things people say about you on your LinkedIn profile. Good luck to you, my friend. And thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you, Jonathan.
Great. All right. We'll see you on the next episode of the Wholesale Change Show. You will get emails from us and advertising on LinkedIn. We'll make sure the dates are right. Thanks, everyone, and have a great remainder of the week. Bye now.